All right, well, thank you to the National Forum for Biological Recording for inviting me to speak today. A little bit about me, first of all, so for those who don't know me, my name is Keiron and I work for the Field Studies Council. So the Field Studies Council is an environmental education charity. And I particularly work on a project called FST Biolinks. So I'm going to talk about online learning during lockdown, but I think before I do that, I need to give a little bit of context and go a little bit back in time. So next slide. So the FST Biolinks project is a lottery funded project, and it's all about biological recording and teaching people to identify species. So specifically, we're looking at recording and identifying invertebrates that are classed as difficult to identify and under-recorded, which really covers pretty much everything except butterflies, which are a bit easier to record and better recorded, a bit easier to ID and better recorded. The project runs for 5 years. Next slide, Martin, please. And what we're looking to do, what we've been looking to do is introduce structured learning pathways. So we have opportunities at different levels, right from an introductory level through to even training opportunities for those people that are actually experts. And there's a range of different types of activities there, from engagement courses like our Learn to Love courses and our Looking at Invertebrates with Microscopes courses, our BioBlitz events, through to activities that are for people at different levels on their recorder journey, which include getting out in the field, looking down microscopes, classroom teaching, and the like. Next slide, please, Martin. And what that means for the ID training in particular are these structured pathways that go right from the bottom level through to the more advanced levels. What you've got here is our training pathway for beetles just in 2020. So these were all the wonderful courses that we had planned for this year, starting with our Learn to Love courses and working their way up, even covering things like bark beetles and weevils, which are a bit more difficult. And as you'll see, at the bottom, you've got our classroom-based courses going up into our field-based courses, and everything in the orange level, the intermediate and advanced level, is microscope-based. So next slide, please, Martin. During 2018 and 2019, the first 2 years of the project, we had a lot of success. We taught over 199 species ID courses, 46 volunteer ID days. We were working at 42 different sites, and we had nearly 3,000 course and event attendees, which was way above what our targets were with the project. So we're really pleased with how well it's been doing. One thing we were above target on technically, but that I thought could have been a lot better, was the number of biological records. You can see there, we can claim responsibility for 2,900 records over the 2 years. So we've done a lot of training during those 2 years, but something seemed to be holding back some of our volunteers with actually getting out there and recording. So 2020 was going to be all about getting people out recording. So turning some of those people that we've trained up into active recorders. Next slide, please, Martin. And one of the ways that I was planning on doing that was with a bit of promotion about iRecord. Now, I've heard that people at iRecord actually go around saying that I love iRecord more than they do. So this won't be a surprise to some of the people in the audience that know me and know iRecord. Next slide, please, Martin. What I found I was getting, and one of the barriers, was that we had all these local groups where people come into our courses, etc., in London, but they weren't actually that sure about how to get their groups recording. So we had group leaders and members of groups coming to these courses and actually asking me for help. How can they get their group recording? So next slide, please, Martin. And there were a couple of problems here. So what the group leaders needed was quite often their primary interest wasn't recording. It was quite often either considering the wildlife and nature within an area of London or on a specific site. So the group leaders quite often needed general guidance on biological recording. They quite often needed a bit of training on using iRecord, and they needed help setting up and managing their iRecord activity, because they wanted an activity on iRecord where they could access the data, as well as local record centres and national recording schemes. So they needed that help from me. They also needed help for their members, and their members, like the group leaders, would need general guidance on biological recording and training on using iRecord, but they also needed confidence building that their observations were meaningful. So they needed convincing that actually going out and recording and submitting their records was something that they could do, and that there was a point to it, that their observation of a fox or a robin is still valuable. And a big part of that, as many people in this conference will know, is that getting people to record the common things can be quite difficult, because people assume we know everything about the common things, when in fact we don't. The problem with this was that I had 2 different audiences to teach at the same location, and I had too little time to reach everybody that wanted help. So going to all of these individual sites was not pragmatic, and I was struggling to give people the help that wanted it. And I think an overarching thing here to remember is that these people, if I don't go in and help them, they're quite intimidated by both biological recording, because they're seeing it as this complicated scientific thing that they are not qualified for. And although that may not be the truth, that confidence needed building, but they're also intimidated by iRecord because it's a digital system, and any digital system will intimidate some people. So next slide, please, Martin. So I planned to go, I'd been to one site and I was going to a second of those groups that I showed you, but then our good friend severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 hit. The COVID-19 pandemic started, and next slide please, Martin. And that resulted in the Biolinks courses being cancelled en masse. So the tables you're seeing here are my report to the lottery about the courses that are cancelled just within my region, within the southeast. So my colleague Holly is at the conference today. She manages the West Midlands region, and she had an equal number of courses that were cancelled. And in total, we cancelled 92 courses and events that had been booked in, venues booked, tutors booked, etc. People, in some cases, people actually booking on the events as well. So 92 courses and events were cancelled, and a number of other courses and events that were in development were never fully organised because we had to abandon the plans for them. So next slide, please, Martin. So then we had a decision to make with COVID-19, and that was whether to furlough the project team or to not furlough the project team, because we clearly couldn't deliver the training courses that we said we'd do. We were supposed to deliver them at specific training centres and venues across the South East and West Midlands, and we couldn't do that anymore. However, another consideration was that much of my organisation, the Field Studies Council, was shut down. We couldn't accept schools at our centres anymore. A lot of our, or most of our adult courses as well, particularly during lockdown, all of them would have to be cancelled. So I was very aware that if I didn't do something with the Biolinks project and try and remain open for business, it would decrease the amount of exposure that an important charity like the Field Studies Council has with the wider public. And I also noticed that a lot of other recording and conservation projects were being put on hold and having to stop what they were doing. So I discussed it with my team, and we had the idea that teaching didn't always have to be in the classroom. That's obviously not something new. And we decided to consider online, and we decided to do this quite rapidly because we didn't want to spend a lot of time planning this. We wanted to get out there and engage and educate people straight away. I personally attended about 4 different training courses within a week, because there was training courses popping up everywhere on how to deliver and run online training. So next slide, please, Martin. So going into this, there are a couple of barriers that we thought about. A couple of these are reasons perhaps why we hadn't thought too much about online training before, but I started thinking about online training because of my iRecord problem, and it was something that was at the back of my mind, but I didn't have the capacity or time to deal with. So the barriers to online learning, first of all, there's accessibility. Not everybody has a computer, not everybody has an internet connection, not everybody is confident using even mobile devices to access this type of training. I think that's something that's changed a lot now because of recent events, but certainly at the beginning of the pandemic, that was a worry that a barrier to online training is accessibility. Also costs to set up. So we didn't have infrastructure in place within the FSE to deliver online training. We didn't have an online training platform or website or anything like that, and we didn't have a lot of experience with delivering online training. Also, the tired face there is in recognition of the one barrier with online training that I think we should recognise is that it's very difficult to keep people engaged for as long online as you can in a classroom. So people will come to the FSC for a whole day and we'll teach them about Longhorn Beetle ID. I think to teach people for 6 hours on a Zoom call or on GoToWebinar like this would be really, really difficult. I think people would lose interest. People don't find it harder to actually engage via online methods for a prolonged period of time, although you can be inventive. The trees there are just another reason why I think we hadn't engaged with online learning as much as perhaps we could have in the past. Is the Field Service Council's mantra is to get people outside learning, and we associate online learning with being inside. That's maybe an unfair association, but again, it's a barrier that people have as well. The concept that online learning isn't as good as going outside, even though the two can be combined. And finally, the tools to deliver. That's just another reference to the fact that we actually didn't have the infrastructure set up to deliver online training. So as well as costs, it takes time to build these tools. Next slide, please, Martin. So what are the perceived benefits to online learning? So when we were considering this, we were also thinking about, okay, but how can this benefit us? And I think I mentioned accessibility as a barrier, but accessibility is also a huge benefit. And people with mobility issues, people who just can't get to our centres actually can access the online learning. So there's increased accessibility as well. It's got a bigger reach. So Biolinks is based in 2 regions, and people do come from outside of our regions to go on our courses, but they have to travel. Sometimes they have to stay over to do that. This allowed us to reach the whole of the UK and even beyond. And as an example, we even had a speaker from the United States in an event that we ran this week. So yeah, bigger reach in terms of both audience and the people that we can get to teach. I was never going to ship somebody over from America to teach a course previously. It also gives us an increased capacity. So whereas I'm limited by classroom size with our place-based learning, with the online learning, we can have much bigger groups. And depending on how we design the online learning that we're delivering, we can have reasonably sized groups, so we can grow huge. And our capacity on our virtual talks, for example, is 300 people. And it's very hard to get 300 people even to a lecture theatre for a talk if you're running one locally. The piggy bank is there because obviously you can do it on the cheap, and you can do it much cheaper than you can ever deliver training courses in classrooms on sites, because you don't even have to provide tea and coffee. Do you know what I mean? So as long as you've got the tools you need to actually deliver the training, it's a lot cheaper to deliver. There's no venue hire or anything like that. And finally, I've got the nuclear power plant there, the factory symbol, just to an added benefit that I don't think I've heard very much before is that it hugely reduces the environmental footprint of the training products that we deliver. So although everybody's logged into their computer and using their computer, nobody's using transport to get to us. So the carbon footprint, I would assume, is much, much lower. Yeah, so next slide, please, Martin. So we decided that we were going to engage with online learning, and we decided that we had two aims. We wanted to engage people with invertebrates and recording. So we wanted to make sure we were lining people up for those ID courses when we can start them again. And we wanted to provide people with identification and recording training. So we didn't want to completely stop the training we were doing. We wanted to find ways to bring that into online as well. So next slide, please, Martin. So with those two aims in mind, we decided to pick a single tool that we would use, and we opted for Zoom. We opted for Zoom because I'd seen it used before, been on a training course how to use it. It was a platform where the FSE already had a business account, so we could have up to 300 people on it. My experience of it is that it doesn't drop out signal-wise in the same way that other things do, like Microsoft Teams and Skype. That may just be me, but I've had difficulties with them, where Zoom seems to work a little bit better, and it's got lots of useful features that a lot of these other platforms have, but like the ability to record the sessions, the ability to include polls, the chat function, etc. So for those who don't know, yeah, Zoom is a video conferencing tool, but you're able to share your screen. So here we've got an image from one event where our speaker is talking about the bumblebee. Yeah. So next slide, please, Martin. So in order to engage people with invertebrates and recording, the main product we put forward for that was our virtual meetup series. So these were 30 to 40 minute online virtual talks, live talks, where people would enter the video conference room with the speaker, and there'd be a 30 to 40 minute talk, and then 15 to 20 minutes of questions. We ran 30 virtual talks. We had 6,719 bookings, 4,115 people actually attended. And the reason I put both of them on is because the people that booked still got all the communications about it. So even though they may not have engaged with the live event, they may have engaged with the further information and the recording afterwards. So we recorded all of the sessions, bar one, because the speaker wasn't keen for us to do it with that one. And they all went on YouTube, and we've to date, as of yesterday, we had 10,276 YouTube views through those talks, which means we're actually almost at the point where we become a YouTube partner and monetize actually our YouTube channel, which is fantastic. We made £3,919 in donated fees, and the reason I put that on there is one of the consequences of COVID-19 is that my organisation, the Field Studies Council, is now going to struggle to meet its commitment to this lottery funded project. So it's committed to 160,000 in match funding to the lottery for the project, and this helps write some of that off, because obviously with COVID-19 money is not as abundant as it perhaps was. Maybe it wasn't even that abundant before, but it's less abundant now. And the fees were not mandatory. So all of our events, all of our virtual talks were available for free. And partway through, we introduced an optional £5 fee, not because we wanted to start making money, although that was a good side effect, but because that was what we got several requests for from feedback from our participants. So they wanted to help donate to this. So not even asking, just putting that option on, it's raised nearly £4,000. And to give you a bit of context, we recently ran a World Earthworm Day event, which we did charge £5 for FSC and Earthworm Society members, £10 for others. and that enabled us to pay the speakers for that. But it was a 90-minute event, and that raised £1,200. So I suppose the point I'm making here is, even if we're doing engagement things online, we should be thinking about how they can generate revenue so that we can do the other education, conservation, recording work that we do. Next slide, please, Martin. Another good side effect of this was we got the feedback that we got told us that we were reaching people that we never thought we would. So people that came to our courses previously did state it wasn't as good as going to a full day course, but they still learned something. And these were 30, 40-minute events. So we wouldn't expect them to deliver the same amount of education as a full day course or a weekend residential. And the main aim was to engage and inspire rather than to comprehensively educate somebody about a topic. But like I said, it enabled us to reach new audiences. We reached people that had never heard of the FSC before, because these events were getting more widely shared on social media. We reached people, as I mentioned earlier, that have mobility issues and even live not that far from FSC centres, but find it difficult to get to them and find it difficult to manage with courses that are sometimes predominantly outside. It allowed people that just don't have the time to come to our centres to engage with our content, and obviously it also engaged people that don't live near FSC centres and therefore are not able to come on our courses because they're just too far away for them to be able to take the time out or afford it. And that includes, like I said, global audiences as well. So we were getting people coming from all around the world. Next slide, please, Martin. So I thought you guys don't just want me to hear about how great it all was. You probably want to hear what we learned so that you can learn from our learning. So these are my 7 top tips. First one, don't be a hero. Anybody who thinks they can run a Zoom-based session on their own is living in cloud cuckoo land. You might be lucky, you might get away with it, but it only takes one person to have technical problems, and then all your time is taken up and you're in a panic. 2 people minimum to run these sessions, but 6 is even better. And at the height of our talks, we did have help from a lot of students that were placed at the FSC, and the more people you've got, the better the session will run and the more you can do with it. So practice makes perfect. Always offer speakers a practice run. Otherwise, you may find that there's problems on the day. The more the jerkier. So the more people that you've got calling in, the more pressure is being put on people's internet bandwidth. So you need to give them guidance about that, but you also should put in place additional measures for when you've got a bigger audience. For example, asking them all to turn off their videos. 4, you're the expert. It doesn't matter if you're not the expert. To your participants, you are the expert and you're a Zoom expert. So you need to be able to answer their questions. The best way to do this is to signpost ahead of the session to all of the Zoom guidance that's there. When you see that people are having problems, make sure that's included in the preamble that you send out beforehand. Make sure that they get the information on the day as well as beforehand, so that they don't lose it. But yeah, guidance. Pick your battles. Don't try and do everything on your first session. Introduce features one at a time. If you want to try something new, you might want to not do something that you normally do during that particular session while you trial it out. So don't try and do everything at once. Chat is divisive. The chat function was the biggest nightmare because some people loved it and some people hated it. So you have to make a decision about that, how that's going to work. And my advice is to listen to your participants, although they never seem to reach a consensus on that with our sessions, and there was a very love-hate relationship with our audience. And finally, record and review. Why not put it on YouTube? Why not increase the audience that session will reach? And definitely use feedback to help you inform what you're doing. One unexpected thing that came out of this is we became the voice, the online voice for Back from the Brink in ZSL, and we hosted their talks. So that was fantastic. Next slide, please, Martin. realise I'm going over a little bit, so I'll try and speed up. So off the back of that, we've now got our Natural History Live series, which I'm hoping is a permanent feature, function of the FSC. So we've widened it beyond invertebrates and recording. And again, there's some more stats there. This is all my clever plan to make sure that this lasts longer than I do at the FSC, because my contract ends with the project, and I want to make sure that this wonderful series carries on. Next slide, please, Martin. So the last thing I wanted to talk to you about is we did also introduce a product that would try and help us educate and train people. So that second aim that we had. So some of our virtual meetups did focus on iRecord or specific ID things, but they were almost like taster sessions. So we ran an online training course just using Zoom called Discovering iRecord. We did 3 weekly topics. We had 31 people in the trial. It made a little bit of money because we charged a nominal fee for it. Next slide, please, Martin. And the lessons that we learned from this. So again, each week there would be a live Zoom session, and on our website we would give them the handouts and assignments that they would need to complete before the next live session. And they involve going out, recording relatively easy to identify things like doing a garden bird watch, and then submitting that stuff through an iRecord activity that I could monitor, so that I could check who had done what and give them guidance and advice. What we learned from our online course, which was predominantly taught through Zoom sessions, through 90-minute Zoom sessions, was that, I mean, this is an age-old lesson that I should know better, and that's teach, don't preach. So we used our Zoom sessions to teach. I realised afterwards that I was trying to get too much information into a Zoom session, and that the Zoom should be more interactive. So I would advise against having big, lengthy classroom sessions on Zoom, and try and give people the information in advance, and use your live classroom sessions virtual classroom sessions to discuss and check learning, etc. Spread it out. I definitely tried to cram too much in too little time, and I think having it spread out over a longer period would have been better. You'll need more time. My third tip: preparing online training actually takes a lot longer than physical training, because you can't blag it on the day as much, to be perfectly honest. So make sure that you've prepared as much as you can in advance before you start advertising. Number 4, get them outside. So this was something that we tried to do, and it's something that really paid off. It changed some of our participants' perceptions of what online training was. It's really important that we don't fuel that stigma that online learning is being stuck inside. Online learning can be assigning tasks that then get people outside. It's an online platform we're using to deliver the training. That doesn't have to be all there is to it. 5, we all learn at different paces, so you need to cater for different paces. And I think that means making sure that there are extra little bits that people that will go quite fast through it and want a bit extra can do. So non-compulsory bits that get them to go away and think about things. And 6, signpost like a boss. So this is the big benefit of online training compared to doing it in the classroom. You can signpost throughout your content, and people can take a break if they're learning at their own pace, go away, check that website out, etc. So we signpost a lot in place-based learning, but people have to do that afterwards. What we can do within online training, if they're learning at their own pace ahead of a live session, for example, when we're signposting, they can take time out and go and get that added content and do things in a better order. So those are my lessons learned. I just want to finish it with next slide, Martin, to let everybody know that Discovering iRecord 2.0, although it won't be called that, it'll just be called Discovering iRecord, is actually hopefully going to get launched this Monday. It will be opening for bookings, and it will start on the 1st of January. So I'm pleased to announce that the FSC has invested in a Moodle platform, and they'll be rolling out a shed load of online training courses from next year. So we're in the process of getting tutors to develop the content now. The first one that will be going live is my Discovering iRecord course, which is about 70% ready, because I had to convert a lot of what I've done into online training. So what you can see here is module 1, which is an introduction to biological recording. It has a range of content and activities there that people will go through. So they'll go through all that, they'll have a week to go through it, and then at the end of the week there'll be a live session where I'll implement that teach, don't preach lesson learned. And we're offering it at the subsidised rate of just £20 for non-professionals, and that can include people in the recording sector. So that's me. Sorry I went a bit over, Jodie, and thank you for listening.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you, Keiron. An amazing resilience as well. It's yeah, really pleasing to just see how well you've kind of coped with a very sudden change in plan. So yeah, really inspiring. Thank you. And I really love the message about the value of all your records as well. I think that's really important, as you say, about the common things that are important too. So we've got a couple of questions, but we'll just ask one if that's okay, and I'll get back to you about the other one separately. So Keiron has been instrumental in our London Natural History Society talks programme, when they thank you very much for that. Do you have any thoughts on how we can go about assessing the effectiveness of this sort of training?
Yeah, so it really is. It's running standardised feedback, I think. So having a standardised feedback form that allows us to rate things qualitatively and quantitatively, looking through that feedback and ideally publishing it. I'm not talking about publishing it scientifically, but making it available. That's certainly what we'll do with the Biolinks stuff. And the reason I haven't suggested it so far with the London Natural History Society stuff is just capacity. So for those who don't know, London Natural History Society have a fantastic range of talks that are all free to attend, and they run fortnightly. So I highly recommend going on the London Natural History Society virtual talks webpage and signing up to the mailing list, because we mail out every 2 weeks and tell people about it. Okay,
brilliant. Thank you very much, Keiron. That's really great to have your talk, and thank you very much. Okay, one of the questions goes back for Keiron, and he's mentioned about having 6 people, and what roles did those 6 people have in the project?
Hi there. Yeah, so we used higher education placement students, because all the teaching they were supposed to do had disappeared and dried up, and they were keen to be involved. So we just shared out all the little tasks. So it's little things like, for example, Martin today has been doing the hosting and has been moving the slides on for people. So it's things like dividing that up. So the six roles that we gave were host, chat manager, recorder, tech support, somebody managing the waiting room, and then we also had an extra person that would actually monitor emails. So outside of the Zoom system, they'd monitor emails for people that were struggling to get in. When there's only 2 of us, this is something we really struggle with, because you start getting messages on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, every platform you can imagine. People start contacting you through that rather than the email that they were originally given.
Brilliant. Thank you. Another one for Keiron. He was asking, how can you reach people who chose not to engage online but would have done face-to-face? Do we just leave them behind, is the question.
Well, obviously we don't want to leave anybody behind. I think what we've got to bear in mind with the pivot that we did with Biolinks is that we couldn't do face-to-face. So there was no means of doing anything other than online, because we were all working from home. I think the lesson that we've learned is that they're 2 different things, and we should make sure, if we want to reach a more diverse audience, we should be exploring as many different delivery mechanisms as we can. Any project that I'm planning in the future, I would always now plan in virtual and online engagement and training aspects, as well as the face-to-face. I think something that I need to make clear is that intermediate level stuff with microscopes, I don't really know how we could do that in a meaningful way online. So online is definitely not the answer to everything, but it can complement what we do.